Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I decided I'd do a fiddly video today. It's got to be done at some point, and I thought today I'll make a start. So we're back to the Project Orchids, the 2020 Project Orchids. For those of you who are relatively new, haven't seen these before, these are a selected set of orchids that are filmed each 3 months as we go through the year. So they get 3 monthly updates, the same orchids filmed in the same order each time, and we monitor their progress throughout the year. Now this is the first update, yeah, so this is part 1 of update set 1, and basically these are the Oncidium types. I clustered them together in such a way that you know, if somebody has no interest in a certain set of orchids, they don't need to watch that one. But as I said, we will be comparing in this video what they looked like 3 months ago. We'll have a look at a photograph that was taken then, discuss what I was expecting, and then in video form we'll look at them as they are today. You've had all day to fly that plane across here. Why do you choose now? That's the first plane I've heard all day long. As soon as I pick the camera up, next thing will be the dog barking. You can't control external noises. There's no point in trying. But there is a blackbird singing out there. It's a little unusual. That probably means we're going to have a storm in a minute. It's an unusual time of day for a blackbird to be singing. 4 o'clock in the morning's about right. Anyway, back to business. So this is a set of I think there's 7 in this first part, and we'll look at them each in turn, have a chat about them. The photos that were taken 3 months ago will have a soundtrack added, so I have to add that in separately. Where I've got pictures of blooms, there will be pop-ups. Full names of the plants will pop up, and we'll see how we go. On to the first one. So first up is my Aliceara Tahitian dancer. Now this one was chosen because it appeared to be quite a vigorous plant. At the time of choosing, I hadn't had it too long, but it was bought in full bloom. The blooms had already gone over, and it had entered that phase where it's doing nothing. This is the one where I always say, you know, watch your watering and feeding, because there's no growth, no blooms and spikes to sort of stonk up, no active root growth on the grounds, there's no new growths. So it was in that still phase that you get with Oncidium types, in the main, not always, and it appeared to be vigorous, one of my larger plants, so it was selected as such right at the start of what is potentially a full active season for this plant. Not all the others will come into that category. So no new growths, no active roots, blooms just finished. That quiet state that you get that can last a while, or sometimes doesn't even exist because the new growths are growing before the blooms finish. But not in this case, it was just sitting static, doing nothing. So let's see what happened. So with a plant like this, we'd expect some progress in 3 months, bearing in mind it is the start of the growing season. And basically we had 4 main growths that finished their season when we looked at the plant last. So it was in that dormant state between finishing blooming and starting to grow again. Well, getting into the growing season now, we've got good strong growth here. Another good strong growth here, got one tucked in behind there, so that's 3, and another one on the end here. So we had 4 growths last time that bloomed, we've got 4 new ones to replace them that will move on through the season. There's some leaves getting a bit tired around the back of the plant, but apart from that it is progressing in what I would call a normal phase. It might have been nice for the old odd bulb to have pushed out 2 growths instead of 1, but so far it's just done a 1 for 1. Root system on this, if it will come out of its pot easily, is extensive. Very extensive root system on this. And as such, I might have expected a few more extra new growths. It's a pity one decided to misbehave and come out round the back. This was deliberately potted back there to leave room for these new growths. Well, these two have behaved themselves. That one's come out behind this bulb, and then this one's come out on the end. So 2 out of the 3 will move forward into the space provided for them. One's going to go up the middle there, and that one's going to head out towards the edge of the pot. Would have been better if it had come forward. So at the moment, I would say in 3 months we have had good progress. So I'm quite pleased with that one. And we should be looking to blooms as we go into autumn, something like that. So that's where we are with that one. Next up is the Oncidium chrysomorphum. Now this was a gift from Zaina Rapper. You will know her if for being quite active on the Facebook group and does occasionally comment on the videos. She is secretary of either the British Orchid Council or the British Orchid Growers. No, I don't think that exists anymore. Anyway, she's very well known in the orchid community, and this was a gift along with 2 species Miltoniopsis, one of which has ceased to be, and the other one we'll be looking at in one of the other parts in this series because it was chosen to follow through. So this one at the time when I got it had 0 roots, not one, zilch, absolutely nothing. It was potted up in bark and moss. It started a new growth, which at this stage is pushing on. It hadn't really done much about roots yet, but I had high hopes for this getting a decent root system and pushing that new growth on. And at that stage, that's all I could hope for. So let's see where we got with that one. Now there are times with when what's above ground, above the top of the pot, is the most important thing going on, and other times it's what's below ground. This is a combination of the two. The little new growth we had was pushing on quite nicely, so that's done well. The overall look of the plant's not bad, considering we started with no roots. We've now got a pot full. And boy, is that dry. Well, it's watering day tomorrow, but some plants dry out before it's watering day. That shouldn't really dry right out like that. It's because it's in relatively new bark. But nonetheless, it doesn't suffer as a consequence. It'll push on. It's not like it's getting crinkled leaves or anything. It carries on growing. So, yeah, I'm quite pleased with the progress on that. There's no reason why this shouldn't bloom when it matures. No reason at all. So it's coming on well. In 3 months it's produced a flipping good root system, and its little new growth is pushing on nicely. So it's a typical progress on an Oncidium type. But as a species it was a new one on me, so I didn't know whether it was going to be vigorous, a slow grower, difficult, easy, so it's doing okay. I think this one will be successful, and the beauty of this one so far, given it's been kept in the same conditions as many other Oncidiums, this one hasn't suffered with light issues. It's stayed a good green all through the bright light that other Oncidiums have put up with less well. So it strikes me this one can take brighter light. Yeah, so maybe down the line a bit this will need a bit more light on the grounds that perhaps we're hoping to get some blooms on this new growth. But at the moment I'm just happy it's growing and has produced a good root system, so coming on well. Now we move on to one I've had for years and it will not grow, and that's why it was chosen. Reasons unknown, quite honestly, although in one case it was left in its pot too long and the media went sour. So that didn't do the roots any good. Anyway, this one is pulling up. It's doing better than it ever has done, but I still wouldn't say it's doing well. It had a couple of growths that had sort of pushed on but not matured properly at all, and at the front of the plant you can see it's got a new growth sort of just getting going. It had some roots. I wouldn't say a good root system, but there were some there. But this was looking better than it ever had before. So I had hopes that it was just going to get into the state where it'd be classed as a reasonable plant, which it hadn't been for several years. So progress on this one is not exactly tremendous, but doing better than it has done over the last few years, since it just refuses to grow. This new growth has matured as good as it's going to get, I suspect, which is better than most of what it's done before. We have a new growth progressing here, and then another one round here that again is not going to mature any better than that, I don't think. So this plant's still not doing well. It's got a root system, and there's some actively growing roots in amongst there too, that have started relatively recently. So it's all I can say really is it's coming on. That's about as good as it gets with that one. I don't expect to see any spikes on any of these growths unless this one pushes on strongly and puts on a hell of a spurt and gets a decent sized bulb. Then I don't think it's going to bloom on the growths it's currently got. Okay, so the Psychopsis was chosen. People asked for this one, and it was on my list anyway, so it got in there by hook or by crook. Relatively new plant, bought really at the wrong time of year, because it had to go straight into my winter, which is too cold, having been disturbed and put on a mount with some live moss. However, at this particular point, it had come out of winter. It had completed the 2 leaves on the new growths and wasn't really doing much. I was waiting to see what happened next at this point. But I was pleased that the 2 new leaves on the 2 growths had actually gone up to somewhere near full size. So from that point of view, it was doing okay. What it needed to do now was something different, like start some new growths, grow some roots, perish the thought, even start a spike. So it was difficult to know what it was going to do next, but it was coming into a time of year where it would be more happy. Now the Psychopsis was never expected to do that much through the winter, but now it's got its temperatures, and providing the humidity stays there, it should start to do things. Well, what it has done is the 2 new growths that were on it when I got it, which was this one here, have produced quite a nice little bulb in there. It's hidden behind these sort of bracts at the base, but that's a good little bulb, as good as anything else on the plant. And the one round the other side has produced a bulb as well. But what we've got now at the very base there is something new growing. Now that could be another new growth. It could be a spike. Having never grown a spike from scratch on a Psychopsis, I don't know either way. But there's another one round there. So whatever it is, there's 2 of them. Now one could be a spike and one could be a growth. I still think this plant's a little small to be throwing spikes up. But as it's a hybrid of 2 species I've never owned, maybe it is a small plant. But it's got beautiful patterned leaves and it's growing something. Now if those are spikes, they're not going to generate any roots, so it's going to have to live with the not very good root system it's already got. However, if at least one of them is a new growth, then new roots will be formed. The 2 growths that have matured on it since I got it, that were already underway, hadn't really produced very good roots. I don't think they were in an ideal world at the time. Anyway, that's the state of play with this. So over the next 3 months, we'll see what these 2 turn into. If they're spikes, I'd expect in 3 months they'd put on a reasonable amount of extension. But if they're new growths, in 3 months' time we should have a leaf, pushing on. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm pleased that it hasn't gone downhill, effectively. It's done okay, despite my cold winter. So, yeah, coming on. Now, Tolumnia Peach at this particular point was doing rather well, with 3 spikes, producing branches, all in full bloom. First Tolumnia I'd ever had with 3 spikes at the same time, in bloom at the same time. So I was well pleased with this. It was putting on a pretty good show. It's one of my favourites on the grounds that I love the colour combinations on this one. So well pleased. There was no growth activity at this time because it was in full bloom. It's got a good root system on its mount. That's not going to change unless I unmount it and do something silly. But once Tolumnia establishes a good root system, it's quite difficult to lose it. You keep it dry too long, you will lose it. You know, they do need a wet-dry cycle, but there is emphasis on the fact that there's a wet bit in there. So don't leave them dry too long. But I was pleased with this. 3 spikes, good set of blooms, and this actually came second in the Bournemouth Orchid Society show in February, which we managed to just about get in before everybody got shut down. We did well out of that. Yeah, very lucky with that. Well, the Tolumnia Peach, believe it or not, is still in bloom on one of those original 3 spikes. And bearing in mind those spikes were in bloom last time we looked at this. So this has done incredibly well. Now 2 spikes have been taken off, yes, but 1 is still in bloom. Now as soon as I touch this it'll fall over, so once I touch it I'm going to have to hold it. But yeah, we still have blooms. Now these are branches, you know, on the original spike, and these are starting to fade now. So it is on its last legs as far as blooming is concerned. But it's done incredibly well. Now as far as the plant is concerned, it's now coming into growth. You can see a good strong new growth there, yeah, and another one here down the bottom. So we've got 2 strong new growths coming out on the left hand side of the plant. That's probably going to be it at the moment. Oh no, I can see another one, but it's going to be difficult to show you. It's near the base of the spike. So there's another one coming out there. So that's up the back of the plant. So that's just started, so that's a new growth. So we've got 2 growths pushing on quite strong, and another one coming out at the back of the plant. So at this point in time we've got two growths at a medium stage, I'd say, half size, and one just starting. Those will be the areas that the next set of spikes will come from. So in theory we may get another 3 spikes down the line, but the spike we've currently got is about to come off. So I'm very pleased with this Tolumnia. It performs well. It's got tinges of purple, but it's also got green with no purple. So it's a balancing act. If you push the light level too much, the whole plant will go dark purple, and that doesn't do it any good at all. It's like putting on a suntan, and it stops it photosynthesizing properly, so you can't go too far. But some purple shows it's getting at least enough, yeah? No purple at all and a deep coloured green probably means it's not getting enough light, and it either may not bloom or not bloom as well. So I'm pleased with the progress of the plant. In 3 months' time we will be looking to see how those growths have matured, and I doubt by then there'll be any signs of new spikes, but you never know with Tolumnias. So it's a good performer, this one. Pleased with this one. Nice strong plant. Now, as I've always said, when I select a set of plants for these updates, I don't select my best. I like to incorporate some some troublesome and problem plants, and this is one of those. This is highly suspect on the grounds that it's probably got a virus. Without a proper test, difficult to prove, but it has the symptoms. Last time it bloomed, the blooms had colour break and distortions, which is one of the telltale signs. But it can happen for other reasons. So I decided to keep it, separate it, but keep it and see what happens. And at this particular point in time, it was pushing up a new growth at the back of the plant, which is unusual, off of an old pseudo bulb. And at the front of the plant, it actually had 3 new growths pushing out. They didn't look normal. There was something odd about them, almost as though they had too many leaves tightly clustered together. So it still didn't look right. But the plan was to keep it separate and grow it on and hopefully get another set of blooms and look at those. And the decision would be made at that point in time. If these new growths don't produce any blooms, I'm in a bit of a quandary, but it's not in my way. I can keep it separate. So the plan was to keep it and see what happens. Not many people have a virus plant. Now this Miltonia is still highly suspect. Although it's still here, I do keep it separate, water it separate and all that sort of stuff. But why it's suspect has got nothing to do with this leaf or this leaf, because that's the oldest pseudo bulb. So that's probably a natural drop, just natural dieback of a very old pseudo bulb. We have a growth coming up here that's not right. The leaves are short. I'm not sure that growth's going to progress anymore, but it's coming out of the very oldest part of the plant. Whereas up this end of the plant, we've got a new growth heading out to the right there. The leaves have got creases in them and a few streaks, so they're not good. And then coming inside of that one, we have another new growth. Again, the leaves are quite tightly clustered. They're not pushing upwards and outwards as best as they should. And then the one over to this side, you can see they're not concertina effects, they're creases. Now that still could be lack of hydration, and it still could be what I believe may well be the problem. But this area of the plant has grown to that size without producing any new roots, but it's just starting to produce some. They look weak to me. So this plant might not make the end of the year, the end of this year's project plants. It depends what it does. In my mind, I'm hoping to get a bloom spike on one of these growths and see the blooms open. And then, like I've said before, the growths don't look as good as they should. They're not right. They're not quite right. In some cases, for what the plant has done in the past, they've got too many leaves, which is a form of distortion. Oh, I've only just noticed as well, there's another huge new growth starting here. So it's putting out yet another new growth. So it's certainly got the ability to grow. But it'll depend on the blooms. If we get that really bad colour break and distortions in the next set of blooms, if and when we get any, then I'm afraid it's going to have to go. It is one I might replace if I ever saw it again though. But, you know, it's being tolerated at the moment, and we'll see how it progresses. I must admit I hadn't noticed that. Yet another new growth. I don't know. It's difficult to say, but it's not in my way. And when I water this one, all I do is let the water go on the floor instead of sort of reusing it for a couple more plants. So it stays separate. So it's not causing me any hassles yet. So it gets to stay for a bit. But I don't know what to do. If these new growths mature and they're not quite right, and it doesn't bloom, then we're back to square one again. But that's yet to be seen. So we'll give it time and see what it does. Now this Brassia was bought at the same trip to Burnham's when I got the giant thing that's currently on the floor so that I can film. Yeah, Brassia Santa Barbara. Nice looking blooms, quite large, and at this particular point the blooms had already gone, and we had new growths pushing out. So we had a growth progressing quite well to the left-hand side of the plant, with associated new roots, most of which were going down in the pot. To the right-hand side there was a new growth that was a bit of a climber, and as yet had not really started to produce any roots, but it was pretty obvious they were going to be aerial. So this was the sort of state of play at this point in time. It did have a good root system in the pot, which it had produced, which I was very pleased about, and growth in two directions, with the potential for two spikes further down the line, but they would be staggered on the grounds that the growths are quite far apart. They probably got about a month between them. The growth on the left hand side is starting to produce its bulb, so it's starting to mature. If it matures at that size, it's going to be undersized. You can see the size of the previous bulb towards the right, nearer the back of the plant. So that's what I ought to be aiming for, is to get a mature bulb that size. That would be good, or close would be good. And the new growth on the right hand side is quite a bit behind, so if they both bloom they will be staggered, so that prolongs the blooming period. I'm quite happy with that. It's all very well having lots of blooms, but... And the last one in this set has put on a lot of progress basically. The new growth to the left of the plant has matured nicely. It has a bulb of similar size to those before, so it's not like produced a smaller bulb or anything. It's currently got a spike. We've got it looks like 2, 4, 5 buds on there, so it'll be in bloom soon, which probably means it will be over and done with that spike by the time we get to the next update. But coming along behind is the other new growth that's pushing on nicely. And this one's quite a few stages behind. If you look, we've got a mature bulb on here and a spike probably not too far off opening now. Whereas on this side the growth is pushing on, but there's no sign of the bulb swelling yet. Yeah, so the leaves haven't separated out to show the bulb. So it's quite a way off. So the chances are by the time we get 3 months down the line, this one may well be in bloom. So we'll catch the blooms. As far as root systems go, there aren't many pots I've got that have got a root system like that in them. It's just grown an incredible root system, but it has a typical Brassia related issue in as much as it's a climber. Now this one, because the base of that pseudo bulb was low, this one, most of the roots have gone straight into the pot. This are good, and you can see the consequences of that down below. Yeah. Whereas this one managed to escape above ground, and about half of the roots have gone down in the pot and some of them are hanging over the side. So for now that's fine, but these roots don't hydrate very well. The only reason they don't die back, quite honestly, although they have lost some growing tips in some cases, is if the humidity is high enough they'll hang in there, but if there's dry air around they will just stop growing because they don't hydrate very well. If you had that mounted or were in a position to do so, a good dunk under the water for a while each day would do it the world of good and stop those aerial roots keeling over. But I've got a huge pot full of roots here. If some roots go on that shoot, I really don't care at the moment, but you can see what's going to happen next, can't you? This one, when it produces its next new growth, will look like this. So it's going to come out here. The next new growth on here is going to be completely out of the pot. So this one can't stay like this, unfortunately. It's destined to require something done with it. I'll think on it. I don't need to worry about it now. The new roots, if you notice, they don't, because it's got an extended rhizome, new roots don't necessarily come out directly under the bulb. They come out from the length of the rhizome that it's just produced. Same here, yeah? So in anticipation, as this one extends, all of the roots will be aerial. As this one extends, some of them may, well, will. So this one needs some planning down the line. What do we do with it? This might be one of those plants it's better to just keep rejuvenating, or you know, split it. So you've got two plants to push on and get it back down in a pot. The other alternative is to take the back end off, push it right back to the side of a very large pot and let it grow in a large pot. A bit like the one I got at the same time down there. Anyway, so it's doing well. Good root system, mature to growth, pushing up a spike, another growth coming on behind. So it's done well. Okay, so that's part 1 and the associated plants. First of the run of updates. Part 2 of the first round of updates will follow shortly, followed by part 3 and part 4. They should all take place during this month, but they won't be tied up together, otherwise it's too much repetition. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you like the format. It's a repeat of last year's format because it seemed to work well. And at the moment I haven't come up with a better idea. Once upon a time we tried having 2 videos alongside each other, and we had a few complaints. People going cross-eyed and going blah, 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 blah. You ever try watching 2 videos side by side and listening to words? Oh, no, that didn't work, so we went to a still followed by a video, which seems to work better. So yeah, so see you next time for part 2.